today in our last day. Today we're going to have this panel on arts management in Mexico, and we have three very special guests in this panel. Ana Lucía Recamán on my left side, Alejandra Barajas next to her, and Rodrigo Sigal on my right. We are going to talk about, we know most of you are not from Mexico or don't know much about arts management in Mexico, so the idea is to give you like different spots from very different perspectives. Rodrigo Sigal works, well, I will introduce you later, but he will give us a perspective from the local state, Michoacán. Ana Lucía is a consultant, has a more broader perspective, and also from arts management organizations. And Alejandra Barajas, she is the national and international coordinator of exhibitions at the National Institute of Anthropology and History. And I want to say now thank you to Alejandra, because she was the one to facilitate us the visit both to Teotihuacan and yesterday to the National Museum of Anthropology. So thank you, Alejandra. Yeah. So they will make a brief presentation of their organizations or their experience, and we will open the dialogue with a few questions that I have here to lead the panel, but we obviously please feel free to raise your hand and make the questions that you want. So let me first introduce you Ana Lucía Recamán. She's a consultant for more than 25 years in the area of management of cultural organizations. She works as a teacher in different Mexican universities, of which La Salle University, Guadalajara University, Autonomous University of Coahuila stand out. Since 2001, she is a member of the System of Trainers of the Secretary of Culture of Mexico, and her specialties are training in the marketing area, expert in cultural marketing, market research in the cultural sectors, such as museums, cultural organizations, and marketing services. Alejandra Barajas, as I already told you, she is the head of exhibitions at the National Coordination of Museums and Exhibitions in the National Institute of Anthropology and History. She has a Bachelor in Arts in Studio Art from the University of Arizona. She completed a master's degree in Arts Management and Museum Studies, Casa Lam Cultural Center, and recently completed a postgraduate program in Museum Executive Leadership offered by the University Iberoamericana and Instituto de Liderazgo de Museos in Mexico. For more than 15 years, Alejandra has dedicated her career to the promotion and management of cultural heritage, collaborating in institutions such as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Institute of Anthropology and History. She has directly participated in the organization and planning of temporary exhibitions, facts that have given her the opportunity to expand and strengthen her knowledge and focus on logistics. Rodrigo Sigal is a composer, cultural manager, and full-time professor since 2017 at Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, Campus Morelia, where he is also the coordinator for the Music and Artistic Technology undergraduate program. He is interested in new technologies, especially in the electroacoustic music field. Since 2006, Sigal has been the director of the Mexican Center for Music and Sonic Art, where he coordinates initiatives of creation, education, research, and cultural management in relation to sound and music. He earned a doctorate degree from London City University and completed his postdoctoral studies at the National Autonomous University. He has a diploma in cultural management from UAM Inter-American Development Bank and has continued his studies and creative projects with help from various scholarships and support from institutions like FONCA, which is our national system for funding the arts, and the Voss Foundation for Cultural Management, among others. He is a research candidate level at the National Research System from CONACYT, and for 20 years he has taken part in Luminico project, and he's the director of Visiones Sonoras Festival. Thank you. So I will give the floor to Rodrigo Siga.
Thank you, Guadalupe. ¿Cambiamos de eso?
Creo que ya, ¿eh?
Hola. Sí. Thanks very much. Thank you, Guadalupe. It's great to be here. Thank you to the other members of the panel. And thank you for inviting me to the activities of these 3 days. I was online yesterday, but I've been following some of the presentations, and I think it's a great effort. And talking about cultural management and organizing things like this in Mexico in this post-COVID thing, it's already a big challenge. So congratulations, and congratulations to everyone who has been working hard to make it happen. And well, this panel is of course very interesting and relevant to me, not only because of the topic that Guadalupe was mentioning about Mexico, the local and the experiences with the other panelists, but because I've been somehow connected to Guadalupe for a very long time since the center started. So I'm very thankful to be able to be here today to let you know a little bit of the story and the whole concept of the Mexican Center for Music and Sonic Arts, which is the institution that I've been running in a city called Morelia in Michoacan, which is about 4 hours northeast from here, on the way to Guadalajara, in case you know more or less Mexico. And it's in Morelia, which is a very beautiful city. But the reason I mention this is that also Michoacan, it's a very strong center in terms of like music in general, because it has the first conservatoire of Latin America, which started working at the end of the 18th century. And so it has a very long heritage in classical music and musical institutions, but also in terms of popular music and traditional music and the arts in general. So it was part of what happened at the beginning when I started planning the center after studying, as Guadalupe was saying. I'm a composer. I did a PhD in computer music, and I was always concentrated in programming and dealing with the technology and stuff like that. But I found out that I was, first of all, that I wanted to come back to Mexico, and I didn't want to go into a conservatoire and start working with counterpoint or whatever classes I could get, there's nothing bad with that, but I had the idea of just working with technology and related to music. And this connects the idea of the center with the cultural management idea at the beginning, which was to create a research center that had not only education and research, but also the possibility to provide other institutions in Mexico that were already working and were already like well established in generating musicians and fostering composition and performance and everything, and providing those institutions or schools or whatever with the technology that they needed. It's always, and it's something very common all in Latin America and other countries, that it takes so long for the institutions to upgrade their curriculums, and it always takes a lot of time to find the money to be able to invest in technology, and then everything is already obsolete. So the idea of the place was to be able to generate a small center in Morelia that had many institutions around: the State University, the National University, of course the local government, the National Center for the Arts, which is the federal institution or the national institution that provided the framework for the center to start in 2006, and to have a couple of like really good technicians, composers as staff for us that could work for all those institutions. And avoiding the other places to have to invest in staff, which is also very complicated. No one ever has money for a new full-time professor or whatever, and then investing in technology and have this place providing all these experiences and possibilities to the institutions. Of course, that also grew into working with underserved communities, especially in the state of Michoacan, in our programs with kids and young people from the state. And then the whole concept of the center started to gather I don't know what meaning, I guess, or coherence, when the National Center for the Arts, which some of you know, it's based in Mexico, consolidated this network of centers around the country, the centers for, you have to help me with the name, Red de Centros, the National Production and Research Network from CENART, and CEMAS was part of that network, which is like somehow a series of centers concentrated in one particular area of the arts, mainly to produce art, to do research, and not only big venues or performance venues, but also fostering local artists or artists from the region to be able to do residencies, to research, and as I was saying, connect the local institutions. So the center became part of this, somehow at the time, innovative way of coordinating with the local government, which was like both sides were putting some money or giving us some budget to start working in Michoacan. And then everything started to, like in most of the places in Latin America, the main thing is the challenge is always continuity and always finding a way to go on and work next year when you never know the budget for next year, you never know when the money is going to come, if you are going to have money, when you ever, at the end of the day, when you do have money, it comes very late and it's less or even sometimes more than what you were expecting. So the main challenge of the center and the cultural management part of that was to be able to find a way of just planning, midterm planning or mid to long-term planning, which is, in my view, that's something that's my opinion, it's the main challenge of places like Mexico that invest quite a lot of effort and money into the cultural institutions and education, of course, but I'm more talking about the arts and everything. So there's plenty of effort, big institutions, really innovative ideas, but then the process, it's always somehow depending, it always depends on when the money comes, and the results are always tied only to the money. And there's the other thing that I, at the beginning, I wanted to change with the way the CEMAS was organized, was the fact that most of the results regarding what you actually do with your communities, with not only composers, but the local artists, the productions, the research, the publications, the work with kids and institutions, at the end of the day, you only have to report it in numbers and how many people attended, and a few years later we had to divide that into men and women, but that was about it. There was no innovation at all in terms of how to actually understand what was going on with the amount of money and effort that we were putting into the project. And then you only have to do, like, of course, documents saying I'm going to do this, I did it, and that was it. And there's so what I wanted to just mention is these two challenges. One is that the difficulty to be able to plan midterm to long term, because you never know about the money, of course, and you are always waiting for someone to tell you what's going on, and no one knows. And then the second part was this idea of finding a way to measure the results of what we were doing with technology and music a little bit far beyond just numbers of people attending concerts or taking our courses. So those were the two challenges. Just to be brief about that, what we've been doing for the past almost 18 years, 17 years now, is that of course we always have to do the paperwork and having the numbers and submitting the reports, but we usually also have a second layer of measuring, which is more qualitative way of doing it with different indexes and stuff that we've been trying for years. The good thing about being a center that it's very related to technology is that most of the people that have been related to us and work with us, it's somehow used to doing things with technology, answering surveys in computers even 10 years ago or whatever. So that gave us a tool to work online for the past at least 12 years in gathering information about what our students have been doing for the past 12 or 14 years and where are they now, or what the projects they've been developing. And we have like somehow a database of everything that, or most of what has been happening, not because of us, but because of the people that came through the center and what happened with their projects and their ideas. So that's something that I think it's interesting. And on the other side, when you have all those all the feedback and information, you can always create better information and better institutional marketing, if you will, for the local government, and not only the state, but also at the municipal level, the city level, which has been very powerful for us to be able to not only getting money, but getting support from the other institutions to help us with local schools or whatever we needed at the time. Then the second part of this was to grow into a professional education program, which is the Music and Artistic Technology undergraduate that we started 5 years ago with the National University, with the campus in Morelia, and with the National School of Music here in Mexico City. So that also helped us to start like professionalizing, if you will, the process of education with music technology. But I'm not going to get into that because we're here talking about cultural management. But what I wanted to say about it is that the fact that we've been trying to create a scheme where we can grow on top of starting with some courses and then moving into a festival and then providing the institutions with printed materials about technology and sound in general, not only music, and then creating this undergrad program. And now we have a master's and a PhD, and for the first time, a couple of postdoctoral students working with us. So that pyramid has been growing slowly but steadily, and that would be, in my perspective, a good answer for these problems about mid to long-term planning. Because when you work with the educational side of the institutions or the budget, it's not that they have more money, but they know that they are going to be there next year, for sure, the university. When you work on the cultural side of things and just finding money to create, to foster work or have residencies, you never know what's going to happen. But on the other hand, things eventually happened, and you have those artists and works and concerts and CDs and books and whatever there to somehow strengthen the educational side of things. So education works more in a continual way, at least in our experience. So you always know that you are going to have access to new professors and everything through the university, and then hopefully you can connect that with whoever is there at the time, because you can never plan exactly who is going to be there when, because you never know about the money. And then just as a final second stage, because we also Guadalupe also told me that it was a good idea to share the COVID experience for a project like this in terms of the cultural management. As I was saying, we were lucky to be already well prepared for online activities and online streaming and filming. We had all the equipment, so we were able to quickly just move into doing live concerts online and everything. However, in my perspective, what's been happening now that we're slowly getting into a mixed, a hybrid, or in-person schemes again, it's again the institutional marketing, or how can we communicate the results? Because there was in my view, of course, a bad thing about the COVID is all the public institutions, at least in Mexico, quickly moved into online and started reporting their budget related to the numbers that they were getting from online activities, which were crazy high, of course. As we all see, it's very easy for most of us to have 3 YouTubes for 5 seconds and following things. So everyone, including us in Michoacan, started reporting higher numbers with less money. And now we have to go back to actually doing things in person and having less money and having to report the same numbers. So that's a big challenge that I see, especially with state institutions like in Michoacan and a little bit in national institutions. And at least what we've been doing is, of course, at least our strategy has been to extend as much as possible the online activities to try to keep, like many other institutions are doing, the good things about serving other communities in other places and widening or expanding our network of activities for the academic things that we can do online, that are mainly those who are theoretical and a little bit related to, not that related with music, because the quality of the streaming and all that doesn't work. and then doing in-person activities for whatever is needed for the high-quality sound, which is for local communities. So we have this challenge about the technology that improved quite a lot throughout the pandemic for us to be able to reach new audiences, but not the quality of the tools, only the reach we can have, but not the quality in terms of sound. So just to round up these ideas is that the whole pandemic thing gave us the opportunity to reach new audiences, but with less quality. That's my experience, and that's the challenge we have to sort out now. And the center is based just not in the idea of doing music or using computers, but fostering the idea of sound as a medium to communicate and just develop art. So the quality, of course, is very important, but on the other hand, the reach is also a problem. And I don't think that's something that is very unique to us, but I think that's a big challenge in terms of cultural management from now on for the next 4 or 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodrigo. We will give us a lot of interesting information to open the floor later for some questions. Now I will give you the word, Ana Lucia.
Thank you, Guadalupe. Thank you, Universidad Panamericana. Good morning, everyone. My subject today is Cultural Tourism, a Model for Sustainable Development. Okay, thank you. The objective is identify the base that allow the construction of an inclusive model of sustainable cultural tourism based on the heritage resources of the territory and its control by the communities that inhabit it. A specific objective is identify the heritage and cultural resources of the territory, identify the forms of handling and management associated with community process in the management of the heritage resource of the territory. Integrate the socio-ecosystemic component that the territory. We consider the interdisciplinary discussion for the integration of an approach that allows the implementation of a model of cultural tourism for sustainable development. Context. Tourism for Mexico represents 8.7% of the PIB in 2019, of which 1% correspond to cultural services and 11.4% correspond to the sale of handicraft. In 2019, it was in 7th place of Organization Mondial Tourism. In 1919, due to the effect of the pandemic, it ranks is third of the world. Mexico has more than 13 cities in the heritage world. It's very rich. We have to speak about La Ruta de los Conventos in Morelos. It's a heritage world in Mexico, in the Morelos state. It's here. It's about 11 conventos. The problem, there is no there is no relationship between the evaluation of heritage and the tourism strategy implemented so far, with the well-being generated in the communities of the Ruta de los Conventos de Morelos on the 16th century. High degree of poverty increased by the 2017 earthquakes, the COVID-19 pandemic. To answer to the problem is necessary to know the condition of the cultural, economic, social, and political environment to the communities of the Ruta de los Conventos, and understand the relationship and the interrelation with the environment in the order to propose a model of cultural tourism that generates sustainable development and adaptability to the territory. Here we, okay. The percentage of the poverty is very high in the La Ruta de los Conventos, in the population, 18.4%, the population is very poor. The less is 44.6 in Cuernavaca. Is the 31.9 in Cuernavaca is the least. The high is 81.4. Here we studied, here is the Kipling of the empirical complex. We have an esquema categórico about territory. We study heritage, use, and appropriation of people about material and natural heritage. Then political self-organization, and then self-organization, economic and social. We consider territorial policies, tourist policies, and legislation. Excuse me. Self-organization, economic and social, equality, investment, and infrastructure. About subjects, we study community and community leaders, about knowledges, needs, and expectation. Entrepreneur and officials, about knowledge, experiences, actions. Entrepreneurs and officials, perception, expectation, and experiences. Actions, training, heritage conservation, about the public entrepreneur. Bonding, international organization, academy, and government. Cultural tourism model, we have 3 points, very important: social, services, and culture. Form La Ruta de los Conventos of Morelos from the perspective of interdisciplinary research. We consider cultural management of heritage of territory, cultural cartography, estado del patrimonio, or state of the conservation of patrimony or heritage, social science, development, and governance. Understanding of the needs and expectation of communities and their social process. About cultural tourism, we consider administration of services, cultural and tourism marketing, comprehensive tourism promotion strategies. We encontramos, find, thank you, About the territory, weak control. Serious water conflict degenerates inequality and abuse of powers, land, tenure. It's a very big problem. Means ecological, weak control. Excessive exploitation of resources, food hosts connect directly to springs. Illegal logging impact the reduction of forests and fauna and flora. About means cultural strong control. Rooted the custom of the important involvement in the organization of the community for the good performance of said cultural practices. About the economic process, weak control. Poverty caused by little economic diversification and dependence of monoculture. About social process, we have a strong control, neighborhood organization of the defense of their tradition and natural resources, as well for defense of their physical integrity due to insecurity problems. About process politicians, weak control, little transparency of the part of the authority, opacity of the management of community resources, little protection for citizens, and deterioration of security. We have evidence about discussion, analysis of discussion, interview, deep interview about officials, entrepreneurs, and tourism. For the culture, the theoretical support for the culture tourism model for the sustainable development, we have a complex social system, genetic epistemology, population learning process, how the population learning the process, ethnologic principles about for understand the relation, the communities about the natural heritage, and socio-cybernetics process for understand the process autonomy in the community. We have analyzed the social development policies, municipal policies of the territory, natural resource policies, policies and cultural heritage, social processes, political processes, and economic process. How these variables interact with the communities, and development models, international tourist policies, UNESCO policies, and global processes. The two convents we works in Tetela del Volcán and Hueyapan. The communities, the relation, the communities with the heritage, the convents. And then the community relation with the process, knowledges, use, and appropriation of territory. How the community's appropriation of territory. About the knowledges, use, appropriation about the resources. Use, appropriation of the cultural heritage, social self-organization, political self-organization, and auto-organization economics. That is the systemic interaction of ethnological principles. Conclusions. The system is self-referential because the observer is part of the system itself. The system is self-controlled because it's autonomous and is generated from the bottom up. It is less hierarchical. It's a system of self-reflection because subject and observers are observed. In a self-organizing system, because each and every one is components generates and circular causality. The system is integrated and allows new interaction for the construction of a comprehensive approach for the adaptive management of the territory. Guidelines are produced for the structuring of environmental determinants for management plans, interdisciplinary and intercultural analysis of the socio-ecosystemic components that intervene in the ordering of the territory for adaptive management. We have the model. And this one integrates with the gestion of marketing, about the organization, interaction with the system, different system, about the management of the development, the products, cultural products, about the knowledge and formation of publics, cultural publics, communication, marketing communication, development with the community and responsibility social, gestion, this place and relation with the inter-organization, strategies, the prix and financement, communication with the organization and variables, every variables. Okay. The challenges, determination of indicators applied to adaptive management in the territory in relation to self-control of the community territory, community ecological self-control, community cultural self-control, community social self-organization, community economic self-organization, and community political self-organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucia. I think we already have 2 points in common here for the two first presentation. Alejandra, your time, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for you two for enriching my view and points of view, and for making me feel not lonely, because we have all faced difficult times. And thank you very much for being here, and also thank you for introducing this great community to me. I'd like to start with my presentation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about, can you pass me the, thank you. Gracias. So as Guadalupe mentioned, I work for the National Institute of Anthropology and History. Thank you very much also for going to the Teotihuacan Pyramids and for the National Museum of Anthropology. I'm sure you didn't have enough time to visit both sites, but hopefully you can, I would like to ask you to think about all that you saw in those places, because this is the patrimony that we move abroad and also nationally in our exhibitions. So we are in charge of, my direction is in charge of all the logistics, planning, and organization of exhibitions within the country and outside the country, outside of Mexico. INA has a network of 164 museums, besides the archaeological sites and besides other offices. But we mostly work with this network of 164 museums, which means we have to be in touch with all of them, and they collaborate with us in all the projects that we handle. At the moment, we're handling about 10 projects abroad, exhibitions, temporary exhibitions presented abroad Mexico, and we also have loans, temporary loans, a lot of them, to complement other exhibitions made abroad. And we're handling about 40 exhibitions within the country, temporary and traveling exhibitions. I would like to talk to you about these two cases that, how can I say, and forgive me if I cry, because those were very difficult times because the pandemic was just starting and we didn't know how things were going to work. And we have a strong policy of internal policy to have couriers all the time accompanying all the movements that we do abroad. And we were being asked not to have any couriers in the country that we were working with. And so we had a strong, I was going to say discussions, but not in a bad point of view. It was very enriching. But well, this was an exhibition that was made by the National Museum of Anthropology. It was presented here in Mexico for about 4 months at the National Museum, and the French got in touch with us, and they wanted to do this exhibition. We had to adapt the curatorial project because this was mostly on the Gulf of the Coast cultures, but they wanted to make more or go into depth about the Olmec culture, which was more known in France. So this is an exhibition that had about 11 institutions from INA working, and also 4 institutions that had archaeological patrimony in their collections, but are not from the INA network. And this was one of the teasers that we used either in France and here to promote the exhibition. This is an Olmec head. You didn't see it because this Olmec head is in Jalapa, Veracruz. But we had to move this almost 6 tons head in the middle of the pandemic, and it was hard to coordinate with all the museums because most of them were closed. There were no people in these museums working, so we had to be very careful with all the appointments that we need to make and with picking up the collections. But finally, we got to send this Olmec head to Paris. So this exhibition was open on October 8 on 2020. And
Instituto Nacional de Antropología
at that time, there were no vaccines, so any of us, any of all the team that had to go to Paris had no, vaccines. This was very new to us. We were very afraid. We sent a team of 8 couriers to work in the installation. We had to be very careful because if one got infected or something happened, we didn't really got to talk. Now that I see from now to the past, we didn't really discuss what's going to happen if we have someone that gets COVID, who's going to pay for that, for those costs, if the courier is going to stay in France for 2 weeks, what's the protocol? We mentioned it very, very fast and quick, but we didn't go into depth. But I'm glad everything worked out good. and we didn't have any situations or anything that we had to worry about. What we had to remind all of our team was to keep their, how do you say? Thank you. Their masks all the time, because they weren't used to have it all the time, because we were working in our offices, in our houses, which were now our offices. And so people got used to not to having the mask all the time. So this is an exhibition that was planned to be in Spain, was planned to be in Turkey, was planned to be in Italy. Everybody wanted this exhibition, but after the pandemic, with all the costs and all the incertidumbre.
Uncertainty.
Thank you. Uncertainty. Thank you very much. So we didn't make any more plans for this exhibition. The exhibition ended up staying in Paris for about a year, because the museum closed just about 3 weeks that they opened the exhibition. So the exhibition was first open for 3 weeks, and then the museum closed, and so no one got to see the exhibition. After 2 months later, it was already 2021, and we had the exhibition open for about 3 months, and then we had to close it again, and then we had to open again. So we faced this situation about the uncertainty and opening and closing the museums, and reacting to the cases that were reported in each country. And you can see the team working in the installation. A team of authorities from Mexico went to the Quai Branly Museum in Paris to the opening. There wasn't really an opening, or it wasn't really an opening, because before the pandemic, we were used to this kind of, I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but big parties with wine, with food, and with colleagues, and everybody happy. But this time we were a little bit worried, and it was petit comité. But when we were at Paris, the First Lady of Mexico traveled to Paris as well, and she was part of this event that took place at the Quai Branly Museum. And after that, she went to Vienna, because we opened an exhibition also in Vienna that we're working with a German museum about the Aztecs. The exhibition is now in Korea. It's just opened a month ago. But at that time, we had the two openings. We had the Olmec opening and the Aztec opening in Vienna. And the First Lady was doing also some research on some of the objects that are from Mexico, but are in the hands of other museums in Europe. And little did we know that those objects were going to travel to Mexico. I don't know if you are familiarized with our Mexican patrimony law, but it was modified 1 year ago, well, in December last year, so we could bring those objects to Mexico and have them return to their countries again. Before that modification, our law stated that any objects that are from Mexico but are in hands of, let's say, a French museum, if they touched Mexican territory, and by Mexican territory I mean an embassy, a consulate, or Mexico, any state in Mexico, they had to be retained. They couldn't go back to the collections. So we made we found this new road, and we finally were asked by the president to organize this exhibition last year, which is called La Grandeza de México. It's at the National Museum of Anthropology, and also at the Ministry of Public Education. And you can see the numbers. At Museo Nacional, we have 284 objects from national collections. We have 44 temporary transit. We had to come up with this new term, which basically states that it's a Mexican object that doesn't belong to a Mexican collection, that is in hands of an international collection. We had 10 objects also that were recuperated, and a total of 338. I don't know if these numbers say anything to you, but to me, they say a lot, because this is a lot of coordination and a lot of work, and also having into mind that we are still on the pandemic, that people are now vaccinated, but they have fear, and we're risking their lives. Let me go back, sorry.
Como parte de las conmemoraciones emblemáticas que el Gobierno de México celebra este 2021, presentamos la exposición La Grandeza de México. Muestra que da cuenta de la fuerza de las civilizaciones que han inscrito nuestra larga historia. Un recorrido en el tiempo a través de los territorios, las expresiones de la espiritualidad, la construcción del ser, el simbolismo de lo diverso y el camino a la libertad. Casi 1,500 obras mexicanas de 41 museos de Lina, 22 museos nacionales y 13 internacionales de otras instituciones. 44 piezas embajadoras de nuestra cultura en países como Alemania, Estados Unidos, Francia, Italia y Suecia que vienen a nuestro país. Y como parte de la política del Gobierno de México por la defensa y recuperación del patrimonio cultural, podremos apreciar más de 800 obras, propiedad y herencia de nuestra nación, que han sido repatriadas de 5 países y que son testimonio de la fraternidad universal y la amistad entre los pueblos. Un diálogo que nos cuenta cómo mujeres y hombres, cazadores, recolectores, pobladores mesoamericanos, comunidades novohispanas, patriotas insurgentes, luchadores revolucionarios, grupos afrodescendientes, poblaciones mestizas y culturas originarias del México actual han luchado por la equidad y la libertad. Han concebido el mundo que nos rodea desde sus diferencias y sus similitudes, y han forjado la grandeza de México con sus lenguas, su música, sus danzas, su indumentaria, su arte popular, sus rituales y creencias, y han resistido a la desigualdad y la opresión hasta nuestros días. Acompáñenos a admirar este crisol de cultura y diversidad en el Museo Nacional de Antropología en Chapultepec y en el Salón Iberoamericano del edificio de la Secretaría de Educación Pública en el Centro Histórico de la Ciudad de México.
Conmemoraciones emblemáticas 2021. Gobierno de México.
So the Olmec show was a challenge in many ways to Ina and to all the teams that were working with us or that work with us in this exhibition. And after I was very positive about the exhibition and about my team and about all the couriers that were traveling, and I trusted them so much. But when I came back, I always thought that maybe it was a mistake. Maybe we should have stopped the exhibition and we should have canceled the exhibition. But after some days or some weeks maybe, I was convinced that it was a good exercise to all of us that participated in the exhibition. There are many many things that need to be discussed, I guess, after this pandemic, because we didn't really have time to stop and to talk to each other and to see and to analyze what went wrong and what were the objectives reached. But the pandemic had many people reacted in different ways to the pandemic. We didn't have enough staff to go to let's say Cancun or Veracruz or in the north or Monterrey to go and pick up the objects, because no one really, even within my team, no one really wanted to take a plane or take a bus or go into the trailer to go pick the objects. So this was hard, but at the end we managed. The curatorial project for the Olmec show was in charge of the museum and in charge of one researcher that ended up almost disappearing. We didn't hear from her, and so we had to work with the French team in order to finish the curatorial project, and but we managed. And I was very happy at the end when the opening went well, and I thought that we had all the knowledge that we needed, but I didn't really know that this bomb, which is the La Grandeza de México, was about to be handed in my hands, and we had to build a big team of 100 people, 50 at the National Museum and 50 people at the Ministry of Public Education. We were being supervised by the President's office, by the Ministry of Culture office, and it was hard. But at that point, what I want to say is that at that point, I realized that the Olmec experience was good, because we managed somehow to get through it, and we were ready for this, for La Grandeza de México. I'm going to show you a little bit of images, because I'm not sure if you'll have time to see the exhibition, but if you want to see it, let me know and I can make arrangements. It is a great exhibition, especially because we have these collections that are on temporary transit, that will not be, I don't know if soon they'll be able to come back to Mexico and be in dialogue with our collections as well. But when Rodrigo and Lucia were talking about all the challenges and what they faced from their trinchera, as we say in Mexico, I can say that before the pandemic, I used to say, let's think outside the box, but I didn't really know what was thinking outside the box. Now I know what is think outside the box, because I think that my team and I spent a lot of time thinking outside the box, really thinking outside the box, with no more ideas, but we had to come up with one idea and one way to come up with solutions and to make the head go to Paris and make the head come to Mexico and adapt, and not be sad because the show in Spain was canceled or the show in Italy was canceled. Let's just move on and keep on working. Something's gonna come up, and something came, which was La Grandeza de México. I always like this word, pathfinder, but I didn't really know what was a pathfinder. Now I know that we are all pathfinders. We find new roads to make these exhibitions being shown. And also, I think that museums or any cultural institution, we can say that we are think tanks. Ideas and solutions are given birth in these tanks, and we are the fathers or mothers of all these ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. That was very interesting, and I am sure you recognize some pictures that you show us. Thank you. Let me guide the conversation now, and we open the floor for questions, but I would like to start speaking about the challenges. The three of you already talk about challenges. Rodrigo and Ana Lucia talk about indicators, which I think it's an all-Mexican problem. It's arts organizations, arts managers work really hard, and at the end it's difficult to measure the impact. It's something that we, or arts organization, struggle a lot. Rodrigo mentioned about measuring the impact and how we could improve in the marketing institutional side. And also, Ana Lucia, you mentioned how in your tourism sustainable development project, you have this challenge in the indicators adaptability. Sí. And also, Alejandra talked about many different challenges in a different way. I am not sure if also the indicators is a problem for you, how you measure the impact of, in general, your exhibitions nationally and even internationally. And so I just leave the door open if you want to say something about that. And obviously, please, those online can also raise your hand or write your comments in the chat. We have our colleagues here that will pass your questions. And please, those on the audience here in person, just raise your hand and we will bring you a mic. Thank you. Who wants to go?
You. I think that's a very interesting thing. I just wanted to say that I don't think that, of course, the difficulty of measuring impact is not a Mexican problem. It's more general than that. What I think that it's the Mexican problem is the fact of reacting to the measurements. It's always related to an individual or a personalized view of things, which reacts to whatever measurement you have. So you never know exactly if the way you are communicating your measurements or your indexes or whatever, it's going to really have any feedback or any return on what happens with the institution later. It's completely separated. And that's more a problem about, it's more, in my view, it's a problem about not only how we measure, and how we communicate those measurements, but there's no way of measuring the reaction from the public policies or the individuals about how they read the numbers and take action upon the numbers.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Alejandra or Ana Lucia?
It's a tough question because this is something that we have been. Thank you, gracias. We have been discussing for a long time, and before the pandemic, we haven't really come up with a solution. I don't know if it's a solution, but with a way to understand and to, how do you say traducir? Translate, thank you. To translate numbers, because we are, at least in our exhibitions, what we're used to is to measure the numbers and to compare them and to work with numbers. But other than that, we've done few interviews to the public to see if the subject was appealing or if the exhibition was understandable. But this is something that we have to do it again. And at some point in some of these exhibitions, we discussed about having iPads or a system that could help us have a little bit of information, more information about the reaction of the public But then with the pandemic, we also question, is it okay if we have like a touch screen? So I think that now we have more challenges, but it's a tough question.
Thank you.
Voy a contestar en español y Guadalupe me traduce. Creo que en México tenemos un gran problema con todos estos indicadores, a pesar de que han habido mejoras, porque tenemos una cuenta satélite de cultura, cosa que no teníamos hace algunos años. A través del Instituto de Estadística se han recogido muchísimos datos que nos sirven para poder medir el impacto de la cultura en México, que representa más o menos el 3.7% del Producto Interno Bruto. Sin embargo, muchas veces no se atienden desde las políticas públicas y hay como unas brechas entre lo que se necesita y lo que se hace o se enuncia desde las políticas públicas. Porque hablamos de políticas públicas comunitarias centradas en lo comunitario, que es como la bandera del gobierno actual. Sin embargo, pudimos ver, ¿no?, las cifras con relación a la pobreza. Y es increíble que en un territorio tan rico, que tiene todos estos elementos que son patrimonio de la humanidad, persistan problemas de pobreza que llegan al 85% de la población, que es imposible, insostenible. ¿Cómo relacionar desde el territorio esta riqueza, desde todo el patrimonio, y hacer sistemas integrales que incidan en el bienestar de la población? Ese yo creo que es uno de los retos mayores que tenemos. Para ello tenemos que entonces medir, para ellos tenemos que tener indicadores claros y que nos den certeza para poder generar políticas públicas coherentes que incidan desde las políticas públicas en la economía y en el bienestar de las comunidades. Entonces yo creo que es una cuestión de un estudio integral de todos estos aspectos y considero que México es una potencia cultural en la cual se puede desarrollar una gran cantidad de proyectos, porque lo hemos hecho así en varios territorios, donde a partir de esta riqueza cultural se pueden generar proyectos de emprendimientos y de empresa en estos territorios para incidir en las mejoras de las condiciones de las personas. Entonces, creo que la cultura representa un elemento fundamental para el desarrollo económico y social. Sin embargo, desde las políticas públicas, la cultura no se considera como ese gran recurso que pudiese tener una gran solución a las problemáticas de México y de América Latina, porque esto es un problema también de América Latina.
I'm going to try. Thank you very much, Ana Lucia. She made a very interesting point based on her experience as a researcher, and also she mentioned this is not only a Mexican project, it's very common in Latin America. Talking about indicators, she gave us very interesting data. Actually, obviously it is a problem. It has been working on, and we have small steps done on that. We have a satellite account for culture in Mexico, which gives us a lot of data and useful data to measure. We have the National Institute of Statistics that makes this account for culture and is getting all these numbers. Is 3.7% contribution, culture contribute to the national gross, yes, sorry, thank you. So this is a good, it's a good number for Mexico, but this is a contradictory, and I think this is very interesting. Ana Lucia mentioned that it is still unbelievable how in this country with a lot of heritage and a lot of cultural richness, most of these territories and these sites still have 85% people living in the poverty level. So how can this improve the quality of life of the local communities, and how it's kind of a missing link between the cultural richness and how this can impact in the cultural policy and globally in the public policies, how we can link the culture to produce economic and social wellness. So this is something that we need to work. And again, as she mentioned, it is not only Mexico, she's from Colombia, so she knows very well Latin American region, and we think this is a common problem. Would you like to make some comments in the audience, online, in person? Or question? Come on, Trilce here. If you quickly introduce yourself so our panel knows you.
Muchas gracias por el panel. My name is Trilce Navarrete. I'm working with Erasmus University Rotterdam, and I do research on, among other things, also digital cultural statistics. And so I love this comment on, we always said we wanted to think outside of the box and work outside of the box, and now we're starting to understand what that really means. And my question will be, of those things that you have learned now through this process and through this period, actually, what things do you think might remain as things go back to normal? And so what thinking out of the box will become normal work in a way? And then my other question is regarding stats. So you mentioned the kind of data that you collect, and I'm curious to know if there's a discussion here in Mexico about the quality of data. In the Netherlands, it's clear that statistics on culture are rather one-sided, and so as Rodrigo mentioned, ticket sales or people entering museums, that type of thing. But we see that there's a lot of cultural participation in other forms. For instance, amateur, but also, you also do festivals. That could be another thing. So to what extent there's other forms of trying to account for this richness of culture in Mexico, which often escapes the large stats. We know that in global comparisons, the South generally is profiled as having low cultural consumption, or is sort of poorer in culture, because cultural participation and cultural forms don't fit the usual numbers. So if you have any feedback on that, I'd love to hear what you know of Mexican politics.
Well, I do agree. I mean, the main problem is the lack of discussion or research or implementation on the quality of data. I agree with that, and I know it's much more developed in other places. My guess, or what I think, is that the main problem is that we tend to always try too hard to get data that we can compare and systematize, and that's why these processes are so difficult, because of course the impact and the local and the amount of variables that interact with what you are measuring, it's huge. And it's very, very difficult to just lower that into numbers and finding ways of comparing regions, communities, countries, let alone different disciplines, for example. It's very difficult. At the end of the day, we're looking of how we can measure the impact in these communities that are, of course, not receiving anything from the whole process of exploiting, as I would say, the culture. Just to finish and round up, I think something that I always think is that here in Mexico, I mean, most of you may know that the petrol or the oil is national, and we've been using Pemex as a source of money for years and years without putting anything back into new resources or new technologies or investment. And the culture is exactly the same, in my view. It's being used as a natural resource that we've been exploiting for years without finding ways of bringing back the wellness into the communities that are providing this resource. Just like a very capitalistic way of just approaching that. And then if you want to do that, it's very easy to measure because you just get the impact on the economy and whatever, but you don't really find ways of moving that wellness into the communities because you are just thinking about the whole thing and the money that provides to the country. It's necessary, but we're very much into that process of just exploiting it as a resource.
Thinking outside the box doesn't really, for me now, doesn't really mean that we have to come up with a solution that nobody has thought about it. Sometimes it's easier than that. Sometimes the solution is something that you have given thought about, but you haven't tried it yet. For us, I think that thinking outside the box in terms of temporary international exhibitions means being more in touch with our counterparts, but not only, and by counterpart, I don't mean the museum or my counterpart as the director of exhibitions of any museum abroad. What I mean is some other institutions, and probably not cultural institutions that are going to help us through the process. For us now means the consulate or the embassy, our consulate or embassy in the country that we're taking the exhibition, and the embassy from that country in Mexico. Because before that, before this situation that we all faced, we were in touch with our representations, but not really, maybe just informing, we're gonna open an exhibition, let's say in 2 weeks, but the communication wasn't really very close. Now it is very close, and part of my team wasn't really convinced of having the cultural attaché or the ambassador or the consul part of all the planning that we had to do. But with all the permits and with all the permits for moving people and for all the objects, for all the collections to go inside a territory and abroad, an international territory, and also all the permits that we had to show, all the health permits, all the how do you say, the vaccines and the scheme of vaccines that we had to show, made us involve these authorities from the beginning until the end of the exhibition, of the process of organizing the exhibition. And something that I now say is, let's give it a try to this exercise. Let's see this experience as an exercise, and let's think outside the box. And when I say let's think outside the box, I don't really mean that we have to find solutions to this situation. Let's go like more bigger. How can we transform, or how can we use this knowledge in other exhibitions? Not only in this one, or not just for this one, but in other exhibitions. And we always wanted to send exhibitions to the US border, or through the US border, but we weren't able to do it because most of the companies that we work with, the transportation companies that we work with, they say, no, this doesn't really work. What do you mean this doesn't really work? Well, we never do it like that. Okay, how do we do it? By plane, you have to go to New York, or you have to go to LA, or you have to go to Chicago and then take a bus and then travel for 27 hours from Chicago to another country, another city in the US. And we always question, where does it say that this doesn't happen? There's no law, there's no restriction, there's really nothing written. But we're used to saying that this doesn't happen and that's it, no more thoughts about it. So when we were doing all these repatriations from different countries, there was this one repatriation from Arizona, a baptismal font that was in Tucson for about 100 years. And all the borders were closed. We weren't really allowed to come with through the border, come with any or pass even us. So it was even more difficult to transfer an object. And so what we did is we looked for the consul help, and he was able to get a permit so we can do the traveling from Arizona to Sonora, from Nogales, Arizona to Nogales, Sonora, and then to Mexico City. And we were all afraid, and I would say that more of the people that work in this transfer or in this transportation weren't really convinced of doing that. But what I said is, this is going to give us the knowledge that we need in the future in order to send an exhibition from Mexico to the United States. We're gonna find a gate or a road that will lead us there. And now the discussions are which exhibition we're going to send via truck from Mexico City to Tucson, Arizona, and then go all the way from Arizona to California and to Texas, and come back through Texas from the border. So this is something that I would say that we can take into account and adapt it in this new normal. I don't know if I haven't really come up with the correct term, but I would say that this exercise would be something that will be adapted to any other exhibitions. And this probably we wouldn't have done this if the pandemic wasn't there or wasn't here.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, behind Anne.
Thank you very much. I'm Anne Gombeau from France. I'm working on heritage management. I have two questions for you. The first one is, what about, do you have developed a thinking about the sustainable aspect of exhibitions, and how do you think about this at the moment? Because major museums in the world now, they try to slow down the exhibitions and to find other way. So this is my first question. My second question, I don't know if you could answer that. I heard that the Mexican government has decided to stop the excavations about the Mesoamerican culture, and that you are only working now on the new interpretation of these artifacts, or is it true? Is it true that excavation have been stopped, and if yes, why?
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I guess they are for me. No, it's not true. Even in this exhibition that you saw, La Grandeza de Mexico, some new objects, new findings are shown there, and we're trying to incorporate more new findings in our exhibitions, because before that they weren't really part of our exhibitions, because most of the researchers will keep them for study and then release them maybe in 10, 20 years. But now everything is faster, and so we're able to incorporate them in our exhibitions. And no excavations, I am not aware of any cancellation of any programs of excavation. As I said before, we work with all the states in Mexico, and if there's a mailing list or something like that, I can send you a lot of press releases that talk about these new findings. And I can tell you that maybe I get about, in a week, I get about 3 to 4 new findings in the country. So I hope this answers the question. And about slowing down, thank you very much for this, for mentioning this term, because this is something that we've been discussing in the museums field. We have to slow down. We have to slow down. We have to slow down. And we have to think about new possibilities and about, I don't remember the term that you used for, but when you said your question, I thought about
sustainability and exhibitions.
Thank you. Yes, sustainability. Thank you. This is something that we've been discussing as well, because having these large exhibitions, as when I was presenting La Grandeza de Mexico, I told you, I don't know if these numbers say anything to you. For us, it does, not only in terms of how big is going to be the exhibition and how many meters we're going to need for a hall, but also about all the crates that are being constructed to transport these exhibitions, and all the panels and planes and vitrines and showcases that need to be constructed for the exhibition. So this was a very ambitious project, and this is part of our commemorations, and this was an instruction from our president that we didn't really have any choices on any suggestions. But now we're conceiving our exhibitions. We're thinking about 2 things. We're thinking about, I don't know, this is hard to say because I don't know if it's correct, but it's not educating our directors of museums, but it's having them being okay with having an exhibition for a longer period, because we also have a lot of directors that think that being productive means having 10 exhibitions in a year, temporary exhibitions, besides the other exhibits that they have. So now it is very hard, because when I talk to them, I said, 4 months go like this. I mean, if we had 2 years that went very fast, we blinked and we opened, and now we're in 2022. So it's a challenge, and it's a long process, but I think that somehow we're going to make it. Having the exhibitions being exhibited in a more in a longer period, and also smaller exhibitions. And something that I always say is, I am still afraid of being in a closed space. So I think that most people would share that opinion with me, which means that people are not going to walk through an exhibition of 1,000 meters square meter. We can say, probably we can transmit the same idea that we're trying to do it in La Grandeza de Mexico. Probably we need 30% of the objects that are being shown there. So we're thinking about smaller exhibitions and longer periods. And we believe that with these 2 variables, I don't know how to say, with these 2 variables, we can hopefully make it. We can talk in 4 years and see if this works.
Thank you, Alejandra. I think we have time for the last question. Alex, did you raise your hand? Yes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm Alex Turrini from Bocconi University, Italy. And I was really impressed by Ana Laura's presentation about the Conventos de Morelos. And I was thinking about something that I studied much time ago. Maybe you might know that the first faculty in economics was founded in Naples at the end of the 18th century. And the chair of this faculty was Antonio Genovesi. And in addressing the students, he said, look, why Naples is so poor that we have the sea, we have a fertile ground, we have like the trades and so on and so forth. And he said, look, the cause for this poverty, we are in the south of Naples, in the south of Italy, is because the government and the Bourbons were dominants that break all the ties among the people in the community, meaning that they were treating citizens like servants, and so the ties and the reciprocity and the social capital was basically impoverished. So this links with what the data that you were saying about, the situation, the economic situation of this community, and that claims my question in a way. So is there like any policy from the government, also from the local government, that empowers the community or community-based organization or the non-profit to work with cultural institutions in order to build a social capital that might be the premise of an economic development? Or what are like the constraints, the difficulties, the hardship in working from the cultural institution perspective, in working with non-profit organizations?
Respondo en español, ¿ok? O en francés, no sé. ¿Español? Ok, muy bien. Es muy importante el trabajo en red, la interacción que debe haber entre el gobierno, las comunidades y otras instancias que pueden ayudar en estos temas. En el caso del modelo que yo propongo, que es un modelo para el desarrollo sostenible a través del turismo cultural, lo que notamos es que es muy importante que las comunidades se autoorganicen, que haya una gobernanza en la misma comunidad, porque obviamente dentro de las mismas comunidades hay problemas de poder en todos los niveles, obviamente eso se da por todos lados. Sin embargo, tiene que haber un diálogo también con el gobierno y las políticas. Por ejemplo, en algunas de las entrevistas que yo hice a funcionarios del gobierno, sobre todo del área económica, yo les exponía las estadísticas, las elevadas tasas de pobreza en las comunidades, y ellos no creían que eso pudiera ser posible. Entonces no había conocimiento, ni siquiera de los propios funcionarios, de la situación que había. Se proponían una serie de cursos en diferentes lugares del Estado para capacitar a las personas en las comunidades en emprendimientos, ¿no? Cursos, etc. Sin embargo, en estas regiones aisladas, ¿no? de esta ruta, nunca llegaban esos programas de capacitación. Entonces, había realmente un abandono y un desconocimiento por parte de los funcionarios de la realidad, ¿no? Entonces, creo que es muy importante entretejer aspectos de la comunicación que nosotros pudimos proponer a través de la cibercultura, que es finalmente la forma como se pueden comunicar a través de elementos de información, de comunicación y de trabajo de educación de públicos, ¿no? Entonces, es un trabajo que se tiene que hacer desde una perspectiva integral y sistémica. Y a partir de la riqueza del patrimonio, porque es impresionante la gran cantidad de recursos que existen, y a partir de ahí se desarrolló una metodología de conocimiento del territorio y de las posibilidades de ese territorio para poder generar empresa. y capacitar a las comunidades en temas empresariales para que pudieran ser mucho más autónomos desde el punto de vista económico. Entonces, realmente estos principios etnoecológicos que propone Víctor Toledo, en este caso, se aplicaban realmente a la autonomía de las propias comunidades, un poco como decía Alejandra, ¿no? Hay que también buscar soluciones fuera de un contexto normal y buscar hacer que las personas sean más autónomas y no depender solo del subsidio del Estado. Entonces, olvidémonos que el Estado cada vez tiene menos posibilidades de generar subsidios para ayudar a las comunidades. Entonces, creemos que la solución está en empoderar a estas comunidades para que de ellas salgan las soluciones, ¿no? Y que puedan ser más autónomos desde esta perspectiva de la educación, ¿no? De ellos mismos, pero también de los públicos que los visitan. El problema, por ejemplo, que nosotros encontramos es que había muchos operadores turísticos que llegaban con sus autobuses llenos de turistas, los llevaban, ponían en peligro los conventos porque los subían hasta las azoteas, o sea, había un problema de conservación del patrimonio tremendo, volvían y los subían a los buses y se los llevaban a Cuernavaca, que es la ciudad grande, o a Ciudad de México. En las comunidades no había ninguna derrama económica, no comían, no pernotaban, no utilizaban transporte ni servicios, ¿no? Entonces, lo que hay que hacer es generar una serie de servicios también dentro de estas comunidades, ¿no? Y también hacer que estas comunidades se empoderen y de alguna forma sean muchísimo más autónomas. Pero México tiene todo el potencial para poderlo hacer. Gracias.
Should I make a quick translation? So it's again very interesting intervention. Ana Lucia, she mentioned that the necessity to work in networks because this and to reinforce the auto-governance of the communities, which is very tricky because there is always power disputes inside the communities. But as long as, and she was mentioned an example of how when the tourists visit these communities, there were no economic impact on the community because then they just go visit and go to the big city for eat or spend the night or whatever. So there were no economic impact on those communities. So what they are trying to work with those communities, training and try to make them more sustainable and reinforce this entrepreneurial side of the communities in order to be able to offer a broader experience and offer. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Ana Lucia. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Alejandra, for being here with us today. We are close to finish, and we are gonna need to finish this very ritual conversation now. Just a quick announcement. We are gonna have lunch at the School of Fine Arts, starting right now, 1:15, and then come back again here to the main auditorium at 2:45 for the closing ceremony. And just another quick indication for later for the gala dinner. As you already know, and our staff already asked you for the transportation, we will have buses going from the university to San Ildefonso Museum for the dinner. So if you can register so we can know who is exactly going in the buses and wait for you. And we are gonna return in the buses as well to the university after dinner. So I think this is all for now. The same place as yesterday at the parking lot of the university. 5:30. We will be around to guide you. And any other questions? Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much and see you later. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.